Okay, we are continuing our discussion. I'm about to do a deep dive into Mitzvot, and we're going to look at a very famous discussion about the nature of Mitzvot, page 23. We're going to start with a Rambam. As I just mentioned, by the way, that photo I just sent you on WhatsApp is me holding a Rambam from 1283, which is before the printing press, obviously. So it was handwritten. And in the laws of Melachim, which we're going to do together in this course, we're going to look at a Rambam that the church censored because it has references towards the false narrative of Christianity. And I think I added the photo in the chat, maybe I didn't, I'll add it. You'll see they used fire to delete words of the Rambam all over Europe. And not only that, they made Jewish people do the censoring, and they made the Jewish community pay the people to do it. That's what it was like. We're going to look at the original Rambam this semester when we get to Mashiach Emetz Hashem. Close door please. This particular Rambam, however, is what I like to call the second least studied Rambam in Mishnah Torah. It's an unusual location, maybe that's why. But it gives you the reason for the mitzvot. So let's do this Rambam. Together, it's a short Rambam. It's very simple. Remember, the Rambam wrote very simple Hebrew because the idea of the Rambam was to give over Jewish ideas in a very easy, understandable way. He actually said in his day that he wanted the Jewish people to study his book and they could disregard all the other books, even the Gemara. Because I know it's difficult to learn Gemara, which was difficult in those days. I mean, most people were running for their lives, didn't have the time and effort and yeshiva education, but learn my book. And that's why he got into a lot of trouble in his day. Many people burnt his books, actually, for that reason. Jewish people, by the way. Over here, however, he gives the reason for the mitzvot. And he says, V'chol elu hadavarim, all of the mitzvot of the Torah come for one reason, kedei, in order, lokof its yitzra, to help a person overcome their natural traits. The Torah comes to help people overcome their natural traits, litaken deotav, to fix, litaken is to fix deotav, their character traits, v'rov dinei Torah, and the majority, it doesn't say the all, but the majority of the mitzvot of the Torah, ena ella, are purely eitzot, forms of advice. The mitzvot of the Torah are like forms of advice from the great and distant advice giver, aka God, letaken adayot, for us to fix our ways, uliyasher kol ha'maasim, and to become better people. Let's just translate the Rambam for you in modern day terms. You know why we're given mitzvot? You know why Hashem gives the Torah, which included 630 mitzvot, in order to become nice, better people, improve our character traits. Now that makes sense when it comes to mitzvot bein adam la chaveiro, but it isn't limited to that. He means every time you clean your house for Pesach, you're actually improving your character traits. Every time you eat matzah, every time you leave your field fallow every 7th year for Shemitah, it makes no difference. Ultimately, every mitzvah kimat is going to help you actually become better. So if you do keep Torah and follow mitzvot, and you find that you're not becoming a nicer, more considerate, better person, your character traits, you're missing the whole point of being a Jew. That is according to the Rambam. That's what we just read. That's it. It's all there. You could take that, you could print it, you could stick it on signs and put it all over the yeshivot around the United States and the world. Why are you coming to yeshiva? Why are you learning Torah? To become a better person, not to shout and get angry, which we all do, not to speak lashon hara, which we all do, and all the other veirot, and all the bad character traits we have. The Torah is there to help us overcome those traits. That is the idea of the Rambam, and that is the more rationalistic explanation for the reasons of mitzvah. The Ramban, although a Kabbalist, is going to give an alternative understanding. But first of all, Sarah.
Before you started this, you said that this is the second least studied.
Yeah, the first one is the exercise stuff we did in previous classes.
Do you think that it's because it's like such a basic idea? Like
I never learned this growing up in yeshiva. I mean, I wasn't listening that much, to be honest with you. As a kid, no one ever taught me this, right? This should be like, why are we Jewish? Why are we doing Torah mitzvot? To become nice people. I don't know why they seem to skip that in our, you taught that in yeshiva? Did they tell you that was a real reason to become a religious Jew? Observant Jew? I don't like the word religious. I also don't like the word ultra-orthodox. There's orthodox, there's ultra, it sounds like, washing powder for your clothes. We can make you white, we can make you ultra-white. We can make it religious, or we can make it ultra-orthodox. I prefer the word observant. I'm observant. Observant of what? Other people and their needs. That's what I think is a better. I'm an observant Jew. I observe the Torah, and I observe other people and their needs. Cute? Okay, it's good enough. Okay. Says the Ramban, this is Nachmanides now, and he's coming along and says, obviously, the mitzvot are not for Hashem. God does not need your mitzvot. I know you're thinking you're doing Hashem a favor by keeping Shabbat. You're doing him a favor by wearing tefillin or tzitzit or giving tzedakah. God does not need your mitzvot. Obviously, mitzvot come, says the Ramban, because we need them, right? We need mitzvot. And he says like this, Shiratzu Lomar, Midrashim and all the other sources that talk about mitzvot. God does not benefit from mitzvah, says the Ramban. This is his commentary on Torah. Right? Rather, the real benefit is the person, to remove from a person, nezek, to remove damage from a person. This is physical damage, right? Because a lot of mitzvot involve physical pain and damage. And emunah, ra'ah, and heretical beliefs. Torah keeps you away from heretical beliefs, away from ideas of avodah zarah, right? Or midah muguna. So there he at least agrees with the Rambam. Also to keep you away from bad character traits. Or, now here actually, he's a little bit different. This is a very famous Ramban, which we're not going to go too much into now, but the Ramban, being a Kabbalist that he was, says really the mitzvot, specifically the mitzvot of Shabbat and Pesach, are there to remind us, lizkor hanisim v'haniflaot, the great miracles and wonders that were done for our people. That's why we keep Shabbat, to remember the great miracles that Hashem did for us. That's why Shabbat is Zecher Yetziat Mitzrayim. The Yetziat Mitzrayim is to remember the great miracles that happened over this. When you keep Shabbat, you're building your emunah, your faith. He says the same about Pesach. A very famous Ramban, that the reason we do not do malacha on Shabbat is to remember the miracles. The Rambam has a different Torah. He has a machlokah, he disagrees, and he says no. The reason we don't do malacha is to remember that we were slaves and we're no longer slaves. That's a very famous machloket, Rambam and Ramban, as to why we do not do malacha and keep Shabbat. The Ramban famously says that it's there to remember the miracles. Right? Kabbalists are into miracles, right? So he fits into that very nicely. So he says the mitzvot, like Shabbat and eating matzah on Pesach and all the rest of that stuff, and sitting in the sukkah, is to remember miracles, right? The great miracles that happened to our people in history. So that's why, and here we're going to look at a very famous statement. The Rambam does mention this elsewhere, by the way. But the Rambam mentions it here, because it comes to the Gemara, is that the mitzvah come litzaref behen. Litzaref. Why mitzvot? Why do we keep mitzvot? Litzaref. And so we become purified through them.
That's Ramban.
Yeah, the Ramban mentions this, but it's mentioned elsewhere. I think it comes from a Ramban. Yeah, Ramban. The way it's Rambam and Ramban. The way you pronounce it's different. I learned yeshiva as a kid. It's Rambam and Ramban. So when you hear that, you know which way it's going. Okay? So that's what it means, to refine them. People are refined, just like people are refined, just like minerals, like gold and silver are refined. Right? We know that the Egypt experience was called the Kor Ha-Bar-Zel, the refining, we did this in my holidays class, the refining core, furnace, thank you. The furnace, the refining furnace. Just like gold is put into a very hot, extremely hot, so it basically purifies it. and gets rid of all the dross that may be attached to it, so too the Torah and the mitzvot help us to improve ourselves. By the way, Mitzrayim was also called, in the Torah, Mitzrayim is called a Kor HaBarzel, a refining furnace. Right? It was so difficult, so challenged, so hot inside there, it purified us. And that's why only 20% left Egypt. 80% didn't get out, because they just kind of like dissipated in the experience. Okay? So that's the idea. So to the mitzvot, the idea, so he's saying the idea of the mitzvot more so is to burn away, as it were, heretical beliefs and help us build emunah. So the best way to build emunah is to learn Torah and to do mitzvot, which is, pretty obvious, but, I guess at this point he needed to state the obvious. Okay? So that's the idea of the mitzvot. We're going to pick on one mitzvah for a moment, and then we're going to look at a very famous machloket between the Kabbalists and the non-Kabbalists as to can you understand the reason for a mitzvah. But before we get there, let's look at one mitzvah, a very famous midrash. I thought it was a Gemara, but I don't think it is. It's a midrash. And the midrash is a conversation between Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva, and Turnus Rufus, Harasha, the evil one. By the way, if you get the name Rasha after your name, you know you're in big trouble, because that's how the entire world knows you. That's not how you want to be known in Jewish history. If you're called HaTzadik, like Yosef, or HaGaon, like the Vilna Gaon, you know you're a genius. Right? Okay, so here we have Turnus Rufus Harasha. He was the Roman general who was in charge of killing vast amount of Jews. And he got into a debate. So this is the end of the Second Temple period, when the Romans were fully in control of the land of Israel and about to exile us, hence Tisha B'Av. And he had a conversation with Rabbi Akiva. And he asked Rabbi Akiva the following question. Look at the question he asked Rabbi Akiva, very famous midrash. He said, whose actions are nicer? God or mankind? Who's better, God or mankind? That's a weird question to ask. And you would have thought that Rabbi Akiva would say, God. God's better than man, right? God's better than man, which, by the way, in a lot of Greek thinking, Greek philosophy, the gods were greater than man. So maybe he was trying to avoid that trap, which he's about to do. He's about to dodge this particular bullet in a moment in a very interesting way. We'll see how he does it. So Rabbi Akiva wanted to get rid of that idea of, gods being so great. And he said, God. He said, people are nicer. Right? He said, people are nicer. So he said, wait, you're telling me that people's actions are better than God? What a strange response. He said, can a person make heaven and earth like God did? That's what Turnus Rufus asked Rabbi Akiva. And he said, okay, now you're comparing apples to oranges. Don't give me examples of something that humans can't do. If you want to see whose actions are better, let's look at examples of things that both can do. That both can do. So Rabbi Akiva said, okay. So Turnus Rufus responded, fine. Why do you Jews perform circumcision? Which was basically where the conversation was always going, and Rabbi Akiva was ready for it. And he said, I knew that's what you were getting at, because if you remember, the Persians and the Greeks and then the Romans banned circumcision. They also banned other mitzvot, including Rosh Chodesh and Shabbat, because these are principles of Emunah, but they also banned circumcision. And one of the reasons they banned circumcision is, besides just upsetting the Jewish people and not allowing them to enter into the covenant of Israel, was because they felt the human body was perfect, which is why they idolized the human body. So you'll see, right, the early Olympics were performed naked. I thought that's pretty disgusting, but we'll leave that aside. And they made statues of humans, and they depicted God as humans, right? You will see it's like Atlas, right? Everything's human. So they idolized the human form. So they ban. One of the reasons they banned circumcision is because man is made perfect. Who are you to come along and then, take away a little bit of skin? Okay, so that's what he was getting at. That's the backstory behind this story over here. So Rabbi Akiva said, I knew you were going to ask about circumcision. So Rabbi Akiva answered in a very interesting way. He did a show and tell, as you call it in America. What's the show and tell? He brought out a cake. A beautiful, delicious cake. I don't know if it was a 7-layer cake. I don't know if it was a big black and white cookie. I don't know if it was covered in icing or whatever. But he brought out a cake. And he said, and he brought out together with the cake some stalks of wheat. And he said, which one's better? The cake or the wheat? And he said, well, the cake's better. He said, who made the cake? He said, we did. He says, who made the wheat? God did. So he said, aha. You see, your mouth, your ears should listen to your own mouth. You can see that man's actions are better. What is this weird, cryptic conversation that is printed in the Midrash about Rabbi Kiva and Turnus Rufus? So the rabbi explained like this. They say, look, man is not made perfect. We are all born with deficiencies in our neshamot, as we discussed earlier on in the semester. Our job is to fix those deficiencies. One of the physical representations of this idea, there's many reasons for Brit Milah, but one of the reasons to illustrate this idea that man is not made perfect and is in need of perfection is the idea that as soon as baby is born, it is the mitzvah of the parents to bring the 8-day-old baby to get a circumcision, a Brit Milah, as if to say that just this body needs to be perfected in this lifetime, and why that part of the body is all to do with the power of the Yetzer Hara, of the sexuality. It's another interesting discussion, but not for now. But this shows that there needs to be work done in this particular area, and that man is created to improve themselves. If man was made complete and perfect, then it would be a sign that they do not need to improve themselves, which actually they do. Okay, so that's the idea. So we see that. So what is the mechanism by which sparks the perfection? And that is mitzvot. Mitzvot is the mechanism by which we improve ourselves, and that's what Rabbi Kiva was telling Turnus Rufus before he was killed by the Romans for teaching Torah publicly. By the way, as an aside. No, Rabbi Kiva was killed for teaching Torah publicly. Yeah. Absolutely. We're not born into sin. But we're not born good or bad. But we're born with various traits. People are born with various traits. Certain desires. They're born neutral. But there are certain inclinations towards various traits. So they're not born, what you're discussing is a person is not born guilty or sin. You're born sin-free, but you're also born mitzvah-free. But we have an innate trait. We're not born exactly the same as people. As humans, our personality, we have various strengths and weaknesses, right? You can tell from day one, when a child is born, that they have different attributes. He's saying that no matter what your attributes are, everyone needs to improve their attributes in order to... So we're not born evil. We just born, let's say a person's born with great mathematical ability. I don't know. There are such people. You see some kids... young, some start talking amazingly very early, and some don't. Okay? So over here we're saying, right, but that's not good or bad, it just is. So what are you going to do about it? That's basically the idea. So nature is a factor in a person, but so is nurture. They're both factors in a person's personal development.
Right, but here we say we're born imperfect and we have to improve ourselves with the circumcision.
Right. So say the circumcision is there to teach us that we're born with certain traits that we need to fix in order to become better versions of ourselves. That's what we're saying. We're not born bad. We're just born with this, and it has to be worked on. Human body is worked on, and the certain personality needs to be worked on as well. That's what he's saying, I think. Okay. By the way, it's a very deep midrash. We're just looking at that's a surface level. There's a lot going on in this midrash, which is beyond the scope of this class, because I want to get through a lot more information. But that's that. Okay? Which takes us on to our next piece. The next piece we're going to figure out right now is, can we know the reasons for the mitzvot? Can we know the reasons for the mitzvot? So we're going to see two schools of thought when it comes to this idea. If mitzvot come to help us improve ourselves, if mitzvot come to help us have better emunah, believe in the miracles, become nicer people, are we expected to figure out the reasons? We know that, I don't know, eating matzah makes us better people. Should I be analyzing the mitzvah of matzah to figure out how it's making me a better person, the reasons for it, the rationale, or to be like, I don't know, I'm just going to do it. You know, like kids say, why do the mitzvah? Right? Because Abba says so, Mommy says so. Right? We don't mean to be like that, just like, I don't say mindless drones, because it may not be a bad thing, as we're going to see. So we're going to start with more of the Kabbalistic interpretation, that don't try to figure out reasons for mitzvot, because mitzvah comes from the Torah. The Torah comes from the mind of God. You cannot figure out God, therefore you cannot figure out the rationale for mitzvot. That's one school of thought. I'll say that again. Don't bother trying to find out the reason for the mitzvot, because all the mitzvot come from Hashem, and Hashem cannot be fully understood, and therefore it'll be impossible to figure out the reasons for mitzvah, because you can't figure out Hashem. So what chance have you got figuring out the reasons for a mitzvah? Let's have a look at the words of Rav Chaim Volozhiner, but he's really quoting stuff that preceded him. He says, Ki tamei mitzvot, to get a... Now, it's an interesting word that is used by the rabbis. This is the discussion of tamei mitzvot. Tamei mitzvot literally means the taste of a mitzvah. It's a code word, a rabbinic code word to mean the reasons. Because when you taste something, you enjoy it. When you taste it, it gives you some flavor. So there are two ways to describe reasons for mitzvot. One is the tam, literally the taste, or the shoresh, is how the Sefer Chinuch describes it, which we're going to see one in a minute. So bank that word. Shoresh means the root. When you see shoresh or mitzvah, it means the reason, the rationale, the understanding behind it, which we're going to see. Sometimes you can see really clearly, and sometimes it's nearly impossible to figure out. So according to Rav Chaim Volozhiner, according to the Kabbalists, the deeper Torah thinkers, the mystics, he's like, even Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know the reasons for the mitzvah. He's like, forget about it. You got no chance. You got no chance. If Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't figure it out, what chance have you got? And he says, why? Ki Torah HaKadosha, the Holy Torah, Atzula Milamala, is an emanation from above. It's a Kabbalistic expression, right? Rosh Ma'al Kol HaSagot, from way beyond any form of human understanding. So don't even bother. What chance have you got for understanding the mitzvah? You barely understand the Torah. And what it's telling you, you've got to really understand the reasons and how the mitzvah are going to fix you and help, and it's not going to happen. Okay, so what do? Just do a mitzvah, and that's the end of it. Well, if you look in rabbinic literature, including the Gemara, many times it gives you reasons. So what's that about? That's the Rambam. So the Rambam, as we said already, mentioned that the laws of the mitzvot are fitting, that a person should contemplate them and find reasons. Let's have a look. Even though we know that in the end every mitzvah is a gezerah. A gezerah. Every mitzvah in the end is a decree. What does that mean? Do it. Why? Because I said so. That's why. He says, the Rambam is saying, he says, really in the end, you got to do it because I said so. Last class we did the secrets behind the shofar in my holidays class, and the shofar, even the Rambam says, is a chok. We don't know the reason for it. And then he goes and says, but maybe it's like an alarm clock that wakes people up to scare them and remind them that it's Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur's on the way. Right, so that's like the Rambam. It's a wake-up call. That's a very famous Rambam. So even a mitzvah that is a chok, that there's no rational explanation for, even there the Rambam's like, let's try to find a reason for it. But in the end, it's a chok. Why? Because I said. Okay. So that's the Rambam saying. Even though the Torah is full of divine decrees, gezerot, there are rabbinic decrees and there's Torah decrees. He says, ra'oi, it is fitting, lehitbonen, to think, to figure out, to contemplate, behen, about these mitzvot, v'chol ma shata yachol, and whatever you are able, liten lo tam, to give a taste, an explanation. Ten lo tam, do it. Figure out why Hashem gave this mitzvah. That's what Torah study is meant to be about. Torah study is meant to be figuring out the Torah and the reasons for the mitzvot in the Torah. All 613. Hari Amru Chachamim Rishonim. And that's why the early sages, he's going mega early, Shamelech Shlomo Hevin, that even King Solomon, he's going to bring a proof from King Solomon, understood Rov Tamim, the majority of the reasons for the mitzvah, Shekol Chokei Torah, even the mitzvah that most people don't understand. But there was one mitzvah, by the way, as a side point, that Shlomo HaMelech did not know the rationale for. And this is the kind of question I would throw in a midterm. Which mitzvah did King Solomon not know the reason for? Anyone know? There was one mitzvah that eluded even the wisest of old people. What was that mitzvah? It's considered the quintessential chok, statute, gezerah. Give me a list of all the chokim. There aren't that many of them. Paradum is correct. Even Shlomo Melech did not, and he couldn't understand the rationale behind the paraduma. Now, by the way, BTW, even we don't know what he didn't understand about the paraduma. Was it the idea that a cow could be killed, burned, a lot of wood and water added to it, and then sprinkled, and that could purify a person? Was it that? Or was it the fact that the person who sprinkled it was pure and then became impure, and the person who was impure, by receiving the sprinkling, became pure? Maybe that was it. So we didn't even know what Shlomo Melech was puzzled by. I went into an entire shiur on this one topic. We know that he was puzzled by it, but we don't know what part of it he was puzzled by. In the end, it's all puzzling. In the end, it's all puzzling. I'm saying, we have no clue. Shlomo Melech, by the way, knew everything. He knew how to speak to animals. He knew the language of birds and animals. He knew how to grow every single thing on the earth. He knew exactly in Israel and how to bring out any fruit and vegetable. He really was the wisest. And yet, even he didn't get full agency over every mitzvah. Having said that, the Ramban was like, yeah, but he understood most of them, and he figured it out, so we can figure it out too. He was still a human. I'm saying, it was what it was, right? What are you going to do? The Rambam did not. Some of the Kabbalists did. Actually, some of the Kabbalists gave reasons. Well, we're going to pick on one mitzvah, not paraduma. After this, we're going to talk about kosher. Not this class, I don't think. We're going to get there. Or maybe we'll start it. But when it comes to the laws of kosher, we'll see that kasher is a chok. It is a statute. And yet the Kabbalists give rationales for it. And we're going to look at some of those rationales. So I'm going to basically zoom in after this discussion into one mitzvah, just to double click on it and figure out the ideas behind it, which is kashrut, which we'll see is connected to Gan Eden, because they sinned by eating. Kashrut is connected to the final tikkun and can bring Mashiach early. That's why I threw that mitzvah into this course, out of all the mitzvot we could have discussed. But right now we're in the general idea of mitzvot. Got it? Are we good? Are we cool, me and you? Fabs. Okay. Says the Ramban. Now the Ramban, by the way, was a Kabbalist. You should know that. The Ramban. Not the Rambam, the Ramban. So when he talks, he's talking with a little Kabbalistic edge. And he's going to be like, there's a problem. Once you start to look for reasons behind mitzvot, you fall into a very dangerous territory. What do you think will be a dangerous territory, which, by the way, has been explored and has ended up becoming a big problem for the Jewish people, if you start to give rationalistic explanations for mitzvot? Yeah. You're going to think, exactly. The only reason you're going to do it is for that rational reason. For example, we mentioned kosher. There are people today, there are groups within the Jewish world who turned around 100 years ago or so, after the Haskalah, the Reform movement, and said the Jewish people no longer have to keep kosher. Why? Because kosher, they said, this is, by the way, completely incorrect, is all because of health. Don't eat pig because they're dirty animals and you're going to get sick, right? You're going to get trichinosis or whatever. And therefore, once you start to put rational explanations on a mitzvah and limit the mitzvah to a window of rational explanation, you're going to end up in a big, scary territory by saying, well, if that rationalistic explanation doesn't apply anymore, like we know how to, clean an animal, for example, then that mitzvah doesn't apply anymore. You get it? So you end up disposing a lot of the mitzvot. And by the way, there have been many groups and many iterations of groups throughout history who've done precisely that. Like the Karaites, for example. Karaites do not, I once said this on video and someone in California said, I'm part of the Karaite community, how dare you say that, we don't exist. But the Karaites today are not the Karaites of old. The Karaites are basically a group who follow Kra. Kra means just the Torah, right? Lekro, Kra, Karaite. And they only follow the 5 books of Moses and not the Gemara. So all the explanations, the oral tradition, they disposed of, right? So they say, I don't know if this is true or not, but they say that the Karaites of old didn't used to make fires in their homes on Shabbat. Because it says, you cannot make a fire. Lo tavar ushba mishvatechem in the Torah. So they would sit in the cold, eating cold food in the dark on Shabbat. The rabbis come along and they say, you cannot make a fire, but you can use a fire that was made before Shabbat, which is what we do, which is why you have your lights on and you have hot food on a plata on Shabbat. That's what cholent's all about. Actually, that's why, by the way, cholent is a political statement. There is a mitzvah to eat hot food, any hot food, even a hot cup of water on Shabbat, as a political statement against the Karaites and those people who say, take the Torah literally and only the Torah, and that's why you shouldn't have any hot food on Shabbat, because you're breaking the law of the Torah. But the rabbis go, no, the Torah comes to the Torah bichtav, and the Torah Shabbat al peh. It comes with an oral Torah that says, you're right, the Torah does say don't make a fire, but that's making a fire on Shabbat, which you can't do. That's havara. It's one of the 39 malachot. But you can use a fire that was pre-made. You got it? So that's why you must eat any the rabbis, rabbinically, any hot food on Shabbat to say, we are rabbinic Jews. We believe in the Gemara and we believe in the oral tradition. That's why hot food is actually a political statement. Actually, the word cholent is, what language is that? No, it's not Yiddish. It's French. Who speaks French? Any Frenchies over here? What's shod? Shon. What's lent or lant? Hot and slow. It's made hot, and it stays hot and slow the entire Shabbat. There you go. You have a nice Dvar Torah for your Shabbat tables. Cholent, shon, lant. That's where it comes from. I heard that from a French student many years ago. Actually, she was Moroccan. Okay. So there you go. So that's the idea. So he says, he's going to say, basically, once you start to give rationale behind mitzvot, first of all, you're in dangerous territory because people are going to like, well, the rationale doesn't apply anymore. Okay, therefore we don't have to do the mitzvah. But there's another problem. There's another challenge. Think about it from our perspective. What other challenge comes along if you start to give rationales for mitzvot? You're going to start to give a better explanation for one mitzvah over another, and then you're going to come like, that mitzvah is better than that mitzvah, and you're going to start to choose your mitzvot. Well, obviously this explanation is much, much bigger, and therefore the reward for this mitzvah is greater than the reward for that mitzvah. Ramban's like, no. You can't say that. Why? Because we are taught, says the Ramban, in Pirkei Avot, in the 2nd chapter, Have zahir b'mitzvah kala. You should be as careful with a light mitzvah k'bachamura than you are with a heavy mitzvah. Okay, let's just analyze this. A very famous Mishnah from Pirkei Avot. The Mishnah says, and the Ramban's going to analyze this, but let's analyze it ourselves for a second. You should be careful to perform a light mitzvah, a mitzvah kala, right? A light mitzvah. This is not a kala who gets married. That's with a kaf. This is kala, kal, a light mitzvah. As you do a mitzvah, chamura. There are light mitzvot, and there are heavier mitzvah. What is even that? What's a light mitzvah? As opposed to heavy, what's he talking about? Why is he dividing the mitzvah? It's not him, by the way. The Mishnah's doing it. And the Mishnah gets it from, Mishnah gets it from the Mishnah. Why do we have this light mitzvah, heavy mitzvah? What's he talking about? Light to who? Heavy to who? What does that even mean? What does it even mean, Annabelle Katz?
Is he saying like the easier ones in a way?
Easier ones.
Like
What mitzvah is easy?
Nothing's easy, but like the more
No.
difficult ones.
Some mitzvah are easy. What's easy?
Doing something nice, like opening a door.
Okay. How about a mitzvah from the Torah? Being nice to people may be easy.
The one where you have to put your shoes a certain way.
That's a rabbinic. Putting a mezuzah on the door, he says.
That's a rabbinic mitzvah.
That's a Torah mitzvah.
But the shoe one. Yeah, but
She was a rabbinic mitzvah. Yeah, right, left, right. Yeah, it's hinted at in the Torah. Right, left, right from the days of Avraham Avinu, but it's not one of the 613 mitzvot. It's a rabbinic. Putting a mezuzah on the door. You spend $50, $60 or $80 nowadays. Stick on the door, and there it is. You have a mitzvah 24/7. Okay.
that's their problem.
Okay, the way you put it, either straight up or tilted, right. But the mitzvah itself is one of the 630 mitzvot. It's in the Shema. Okay, fine. But what's the difficult mitzvah? Not speaking Lashon Hara. What's harder? Not speaking Lashon Hara, putting up a mezuzah. Okay. Shabbat. Keeping Shabbat. Learning Hilchah Shabbat. What's harder? That or putting up a mezuzah? Come on. So he says, this is the Mishnah saying there's a mistake people make. And they're like, this mitzvah, since it's easy, right? Maybe not as important as a mitzvah that's more difficult. And that's why he's going to say, we don't know the reasons for the mitzvot. Because there is no one, that's the reason we don't know the reward, the reward for the mitzvot. You know the punishment for an Aveirah, that's listed in the Torah, whether it's one of the 4 death penalties or makot, right? Or having to go to a city of refuge. There's many, we know the rewards for the sins, but we're never told the reward for a mitzvah because we don't know what is actually a light and heavy mitzvah. You don't know the reward of putting a mezuzah may actually be greater than many other mitzvot that you consider to be greater. So that's one of the challenges of adding a rationale, right? And an understanding, explanation. Since that's so easy, it's probably not so important. And he's like, no, you can't say that. Right? There's a very famous Rashi on Torah, Akev and Parshat Akev. Many people are dash bekvav. They step on certain mitzvot with their heel. They trample on certain mitzvot because they don't seem as important. He goes, don't do that. You don't know. That's why you're not told the reward for a mitzvah, because when you do a mitzvah, you may be rewarded much greater than someone who does the same mitzvah. Because for you, it's very, very difficult to keep Shabbat. And for someone who grew up religious their entire life, it's very easy to keep Shabbat. So both doing Shabbat the same way, at the same time, with the same intention, but someone worked much harder on it. Lufum tsar agra. According to the effort comes the reward. So try to find a rationale for a mitzvah and try to understand the reward for it, the explanation behind it. You're kind of like shooting yourself in the foot because you don't know. I got an email from a student at Brown University. Okay? And he said, I'm scared to put up my mezuzah. Right? Because there are attacks and this, and I don't be Jewish, and I'm instigating the pro-Palestinians on campus putting on a mezuzah on my door. Although there's nothing Israel about it, it comes to the Torah. So I told him straight up, no, the mezuzah should go on your door. First of all, it's a mitzvah. Second of all, it's the whole purpose of the mitzvah, right? Shin, Daled, Yud is written on it. Shomer, Dalatot Yisrael, it protects the people inside. So the best way to protect stuff is actually a mezuzah on the door, right? And that's a great, great sign. So when he put the mezuzah up, and I put my mezuzah up, right, in Monsey, who's getting a greater reward? Same mitzvah, same mezuzah. He is. Because lofum tsar agra, says in the Mishnah, in Pirkei Avot, according to the difficulty, the challenge, comes the reward. So you can't even give a reward basis for mitzvah because it's very subjective. It's very subjective as to the reward for a mitzvah. Okay? When I walk past a McDonald's, I don't get the same reward as someone who ate there every single day of their entire life and then decides to try to keep kosher. It just can't be. It doesn't make sense. We're both being rewarded for overcoming our Yetzer Hara in that realm. It's just because I just don't have a desire right now. It's not a test for me to, do I walk into McDonald's? I have other tests, but McDonald's isn't one of them. It just isn't. Okay? So that's the Ramban. Let's see the Ramban inside. So he says, one should be careful with the mitzvah. One second, let's just go to the Ramban with the questions. One should be careful, but hold your question, I want to hear it. One should be careful with the mitzvah that people treat lightly, just when people treat seriously. Because all the mitzvot, chamudot v'chavivot ma'od, all the mitzvot are very special and very dear to Hashem. Don't start to pick and choose. Shebakol sha'ah, because every moment, adam moda behen lalukav, because any mitzvah you do, you're basically testifying to God's existence. The kavanat shall kol mitzvot, and really the kavanah, the intention behind every mitzvah, shena'amin belokeinu, that we have emunah. Remember, that's the Ramban. It's all about faith in God. It's there to improve your emunah. V'nodeh alav shehu bareinu, that God created us. So ultimately, they all will build our emunah. So don't be quick to try to find meaning and rationale and reward behind a mitzvah, because it's beyond your comprehension. Because only God knows what you're going through when it comes to doing a mitzvah. Okay? Are we cool? Yeah, we had questions. This young lady, you had it kind of up? Yeah?
No, I don't think
Okay. Yeah.
You kind of said this, but I feel like the reason people would typically do this is to kind of like have connection or understanding or kind of
Do what?
to do a mitzvah in general.
The reason people do a mitzvah is in order to find understanding and connection.
No, the reason for giving a reason for a mitzvah.
Oh, to find the reason is to...
Exactly, like to see like the reason or like benefits of Shabbos.
Absolutely.
More meaningful in your life. So how do you balance like making it more meaningful to you?
Great.
without-
You've really, thank you, you've pulled together the entire topic. It goes like this. Your question is, the reason we found it the rationale is because we want to get more out of the mitzvah. It gives it a tum, a taste. Right? When I eat an orange, right, I know it's good for me, but I want the taste. It's still good for me without any taste. Right? That's called a vitamin. A vitamin is an orange with no taste. It's still good for you, but I don't want to do that because I want the taste as well. So you're saying, so it's a good thing. So let's combine both answers together, as is our tradition. And the answer is, we should find a rationale, and the tradition is to, and everyone does. But don't think that your rationale is the reason for the mitzvah, because they're way beyond us. So actually these two ideas, and really both sides come to kind of like check and balance each other. The Kabbalists are not saying don't find reasons for the mitzvah, because they do it too. They're saying don't think you can find the reason for the mitzvah. Because when you find the reason for the mitzvah, then you'll be like, well, the reason for kashrut is because it's unhealthy to eat non-kosher, which is drivel, and that's going to end up becoming you dropping the laws of kosher, which many, many people do, including people who call themselves rabbis. Right? I'm not saying on a physical taiva level, a desire level. That I get. People have desires. I'm talking about people who try to rationalize, not the people who are overcome by the Yetzer Hara to do a sin. Right? They still believe in it. The Yetzer Hara took a hold of them. I'm not discussing that. We're all dealing with that. Right? I'm trying to find the rationale behind it. And am I able to give a complete understanding? And the answer is no. You can give an understanding, but it's never complete. Even Shlomo Melech couldn't find the reasons for all the mitzvot. Even he was chaser in one of them. Right? Because ultimately they come from the mind of God. That's the idea behind that. Yeah. That would be a person may think that. Seemingly the Mishnah is speaking to people who have that, the more effort you put into it, right, it's a more important mitzvah. I mean, to be fair, it's still hypocritical. Because the Gemara does say that there are certain mitzvot that are equal to all other mitzvot, like Shabbat. But that may not be on the individual, it may be as a people. As a people, Shabbat, as a nation, we're going to see has many, many benefits, and it's equal to other mitzvot in the Torah. So, and kashrut as well, and that's it deals with the soul of a person, as we'll start next class, Miss Hashem. So you're right.
Right, like there's no source.
No, it's like a given. It's almost like a given, I think. Maybe there is a source, I'm not aware of it, that people kind of think that. People naturally think that this mitzvah is greater. And there are Gemarot that seem to insinuate that. So comes along the Ramban, and Rashi says, don't do that. That's Ekev Tishmun. Don't step on mitzvah thinking, some mitzvah are not for me, they're beneath me. They're beneath me. You get it? Okay, let's finish off with one last piece. For those of you who are left. Page 26. This is from the Sefer HaChinuch. Sefer HaChinuch, I don't know if we mentioned already, is a very fabulous and famous book that was written. We actually don't know who wrote it, which is weird. We always know who writes Jewish books. We always know who writes Jewish books. We know everything about them. Here we don't know who it is. We know that he was a Levi. We know that he lived in Spain, in the city of Barcelona. And we know that he was a Rishon. He lived in the 1300s. And we also know that he had a son who kept asking him for the reasons behind the mitzvot. And he was about to become bar mitzvah. So the story is that he wrote this book as a gift to his son for the reasons behind all the mitzvot. So he's doing exactly what, right, the Ramban was saying, yeah? Finding a rationale. And he divided this book into 613 parts. And while he's going through this book, he did it according to the parsha. So Bereshit, 2 or 3 mitzvot, right? Noach, 1, right? Lech Lecha, and he goes through and you get to Vayikra, it's like jam-packed. And Devarim, packed full of mitzvot. So that's the way this book was divided up. According to the parsha, and every parsha he gives the reason, but then he gives what he calls the shoresh mitzvah, the rationale, the reason behind it. Got it? Okay. While he's investigating mitzvah number 16, he stops and he says, and thereby this is a very, very famous concept you're going to hear quoted a lot, so I want you to get it here now today. He stops and he says, before I discuss this mitzvah, he says, I want to know a general principle of human characteristics. And let's just do it inside. And he says, Ki hadam nifal kefi polatav. You should know that before I describe the mitzvah, I'm not going to tell you what the mitzvah is, by the way, between you and me. I'm going to ask you later on what you think mitzvah number 16 in the Torah, it's chronological, or not chronological time-wise, but chronological in the Torah, right? What mitzvah actually is chronological in the Torah actually is. But I'm not going to tell you right now. But he's going to mention this very, very famous, and I would highlight the following words because they most likely appear in your midterm. Adam nifal kefi pa'ulatav. People, all people, are influenced by their actions. People are influenced by their actions. This may not sound like such a crazy concept. What does it even mean? Well, usually we think people are influenced by their mind. Right? You talk to a person and they're upset, depressed, need therapy, need help, need guidance, or upset. You talk to them and they'll feel better. He's like, no. You are influenced. It's the other way around. Your mind doesn't influence who you are. What you do influences your mind. People's character traits and feelings and emotions are, but this is very, in present day psychology, it's become very, very popular. There's actually a documentary, I can't remember what it was about some celebrity, right, who went to actually a Jewish therapist, of course, and discovered this idea that actions influence your mind more than your mind influences your actions. It's a very revolutionary idea. He says, the libo, your heart, which means your emotions, the chol machshavotav, and all your thoughts, tamid, always, achar ma'asav, are going to follow you. What you do with your body is going to influence your mind, your character, your personality. Shihu oseh behem, that you do with them. He's going to go a little bit deeper now. So stick with me, my friends. Im tov, whether those actions are good, v'imra, or those actions are bad. Good actions are going to make you into a better person. Bad actions are going to make you into a worse person. And he says like this, he's going to double down on this. Vafilu, let's say you have Rasha Gamor, a very evil, nasty person. Right? Remember that kid in school who was just always nasty and mean and horrible? Just like a real horrible personality. Couldn't stand to be around them. Maybe you're among us today. I don't think so. Bilvavo, in their heart. Just someone who's not nice. Just got a mean personality. Remember that guy or that girl? All their thoughts and all their personality, maybe they were born this way. He doesn't limit it to being born this way. Maybe they were nurtured this way. Maybe they were abused. But they became nasty and mean. It could be. The libo, in their heart and thoughts, and yetzerah, rak, ra, kolim. This one think about, how can I do bad to other people? How can I cheat? How can I hurt? How can I hurt people, as the expression goes. That's what they're going to do. Let's say this person, he says, im yareh rucho, this person's spirit starts to awaken, which is a fancy way of saying they want to improve themselves, they want to become better. Right? For whatever reason, they reach rock bottom and they want to become better. V'yaseh mishtadloton, they start to put their actions, vaskor, and their bat madot, b'torah mitzvot, to improve themselves, learn Torah, do mitzvot, just do better things. V'afilu, and by the way, when they do this, they start to give tzedakah, for example. Shalom Hashem Shemaim, they don't even do it for the right motivation. They do it because they want notoriety. They want honor. Miyad, straight away, yinatel atol, they start to become better people. Even though they haven't changed their mind. They're still the same person. They're still the same mean old Sally or Dave. Makes no difference. If they start to do good actions, they're actually on the way to becoming a better person. But they haven't changed their essence, because their actions will change their essence. The koach ma'asav, and the power of their actions, yamit, will kill hayetzara, their evil inclination. Why? Ki acharei polot nimshachen alavavot, because after your heart is dragged, nimshach literally means to drag, by your actions. Your actions impact you, make you become a better person. If you start putting a little coin in the pushka, as we make our kids do, in the tzedakah box, makes you a better person. Just the actions you do with your body. By the way, this is going to be the explanation as to why all the mitzvot except 6 involve an action. You've got to do something. You got to eat something. You got to hear something. You got to wear something. You got to go somewhere. You always involve an action, he says. Okay? And then he flips the script completely, and he says like this. This is a classic piece of Torah. V'yafilu imayat adam tzadik gamor. You know that kid in your class who was like a goody two-shoes? Yes, teacher, no teacher, no, always nice and nice to, right? And always like goody two-shoes. And but you can look back in your life, you can't do it yet, you're probably too young. And you look at this person became the worst person ever. Why? And didn't get their life together, and just became a drug addict bum, and just life fell apart. I said, but they were so why? He says, I'll tell you why. Because they were tzaddik gamor, yashar, straight, v'tamim, and simple. And they wanted Torah mitzvah, they wanted to do good. But imulay yasok v'tamid devarim, but they started getting involved in actions that were not good. Shel dofi. And he says, started to hang around with the wrong people who led them in the wrong path. Yeshuv lizmam and his mom, you'll see very quickly, they're going to go from righteousness, liot rashka, become an evil person. Even though they were born, some people are just born nice. That's their natural being, their essence. Right? Kids just come out differently. I don't care what anyone tells you, I'm telling you. There is a thing as nature. Right? Bliana, I've got 5 kids, and from hour 1, we could tell their personality for the rest of their lives. One came out screaming, she's still screaming. One came out quiet, still quiet. It's just the way it is. Actually, one came out very, very nice, and then turned into a complete nut job. Right? But Baruch Hashem, she's Israel right now. We love her. Okay, fine. Everyone's different. Right? But it doesn't go with your... you can't say, I'm born this way. You can't say that. Because it doesn't come down to who you are. It comes down to what you do, because what you do creates who you are. That's the idea. It comes down to your actions. Ki yadua, and for some reason he's taken it as a given. Hadavar ve'emet, and it's true. Shekol adam nifal kfirot, that people are influenced by their actions. So he's basically taking a detour while describing a mitzvah. What mitzvah, my dear and holy sisters, do you think the chinuch is about? It's actually a group of mitzvot he's about to dive into that he felt he had to give this preamble. He actually does this preamble twice, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I'm pretty sure at least twice, maybe more. He does this little preamble. Does anyone know where you would be by the time you get to mitzvah 16 in the Torah? Where do you think you are? Okay, I'll tell you. We're about to leave Egypt. I'm about to get all the mitzvot of Pesach. And Pesach is a lot of mitzvah. You got to clean the house of chametz, and you got to make matzah, and you got to kosot, right? And you got to read the Haggadah, right? And you got to clean, and it's a lot of work. So he preambles and says, OMG. Before you end up doing all of that, let me tell you that doing all these actions is going to drive you crazy. And why can't you just think and remember, I left Egypt, my ancestors left Egypt, thanks God? Because you need actions to remember. So this is a little preamble, right? Before he gets to, the Korban Pesach, as he used to have in those days as well, which took time and effort and money and energy, right? He's like, that's why. That's why. Because you're about to go and do a lot of physical actions. You're like, oh my God, got to clean the whole house. Oh my God. He's like, yeah. He also does it, if I remember correctly, Erev Sukkot mitzvot. You got the Daled Minim, you're leaving a house, sitting in the Sukkah, to remember God saving us from Egypt and giving us clouds of glory and sitting in tents. And it's like, I know you're about to do a lot of mitzvot right now, but you should know that these mitzvot are going to impact you a lot. The actions themselves are going to impact you a great deal. That is what the Sefer Chinuch is getting at over here.
Pushing back to before, the argument of the Turnus Rufus thing, I understand the lesson and I understand the cake and the
The Turnus Rufus Rabbi Akiva story?
Yeah. How do they connect to each other? How does the cake and the wheat connect?
So the cake, I probably missed that out. The cake is the raw material that God gives, and we take the raw material and make it better. I'm sorry, I should have mentioned that. So the circumcision is God gives the raw material humans, and we have to perfect that which God gave us. So the human form, and that's indicative of the human personality. God made us a certain way, right? You're born a certain way naturally. You're like, okay, this way God made. I'm an angry person. No, you have to work on that. So mitzvot, like circumcision, well, circumcision actually is a sign of it, that we're not made perfect, we have to work on ourselves. That's the idea of the raw wheat and I probably should have mentioned that, you're right. The raw wheat is God gives the wheat, but we make the cake. So we're better than God because we made the edible product and God just gave us the raw material. So we humans are the raw material and we perfect it through circumcision. How? Through mitzvah. So mitzvah are the mechanism by which we improve the raw material. Sorry, that was the punchline of that story. I probably should have mentioned that, yeah. Are we cool? All right. We shall stop over there. And next class, we shall investigate the mitzvah of kosher with all of its details. Have a great, successful day.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.